holiday tips, and fun facts from Paul, Kristen, and Dexter at Total Wine & More.
There are 10,000 wine grape varietals worldwide. Here's to thousands and thousands of gift possibilities.
Chardonnay paired with lobster mashed potatoes? Simply delicious.
I know just the right $10 bottle for your white elephant party. The most stolen gift award is yours guaranteed.
As you check off that gift list this holiday season, we'd love to share our always low prices and ridiculous selection at Total Wine & More. Cheers.
Hey, Touch 'em All listeners, Derek Wetmore here. Special episode for you today. Phil Mackey and Judd Zulgad sat down with Twins Chief Baseball Officer Derek Falvey on Friday, December 7th. They are playing it on the Mackey and Judd show, so you can catch that. It's 4:15 and 4:30 that they'll be playing that interview, Friday, December 7th. But if you've already missed that, no worries. You've got it here. Full interview will be posted on Mackey and Judd's show page, which you can find on iTunes, whatever, Apple Podcasts, your podcast app, wherever you find your shows. Find the Mackey and Judd show and subscribe to find the full interview from Twins CBO, Derek Falvey. Here's the interview. I liked the stuff on their off-season plans heading into the winter meetings. Hope you guys do too. Hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll talk to you next week.
Derek Falvey's with us here. We had Jason Starks, a regular on our show during this. We had him on yesterday because he wrote an article with some inside information about how the commissioner's office and the competition committee are talking about reducing or eliminating certain kinds of shifts.
Yep.
That this might maybe be in play for 2019. If baseball decided, listen, for pace of play reasons, because we don't want every other pitch guys moving around, or just to put more batted balls into play and make it more exciting. If baseball cracked down from a front office perspective, how would you feel?
Yeah, I look at it this way. I'm probably, this is what's unique. I'm a progressive thinker in a lot of ways, but I also recognize that making specific rule changes in the game of baseball is pretty significant, and it changes the way the game is played. And I'm a big believer that I don't think we always think through the unintended consequences of those changes. I don't know what making that rule change will do for the game 5 years from now or 10 years from now. I think what's special about baseball for the last 100+ years is that when it's a cat and mouse game, when pitchers adjust, hitters adjust, and then pitchers have to adjust back, and then hitters. So my view of this is I think we just have to be very patient and careful about making specific rule adjustments that we may a couple of years down the line look at and say, was that the right thing for us? So I just want to be. I'm certainly supportive of studying this and learning and finding ways to impact the game more on the field. But I think when you change mound heights or you do things, you have to be really thoughtful about what that means.
Do players like shifts? And I say that because I see more and more, surprisingly, I think, pitchers don't. Because it sounds to me like if I'm a pitcher and you shift and it works, that's great. But if a ball goes through shortstop and my shortstop was supposed to be there, I'm PO'd at that point. Do you find when you try and explain the why of shifts, do players like them, Derek, or do you find that there is an adversity to them across the board, including pitchers?
It's an interesting point because I think you're right. If you show a guy data that, hey, the shift saved him 100 hits, but he gave up 10, right? The 10 are the ones that he remember. And I'm certainly not educated enough to speak on this, but trained psychologists will tell you that's a psychology element, that losing something is worse than gaining something on the other end. That's a real human reaction. So I get that. I understand that. I think this, again, gets back to the education piece, though. When you show a pitcher that information and that data, they tend to buy in. They want to get outs, right? They want to see how it impacts their team. So I think that there is some conversation with some pitchers that would rather just give up the hit, to right field that maybe would have otherwise been caught by the second baseman playing deep, than give up that ground ball to shortstop. But over time, I think that's changed. I think for our pitching staff in particular, the group I can speak to, they understand the rationale behind it and they see the positive benefit.
So just to switch gears here, and you guys announced yesterday officially Jonathan Schoop on a 1-year contract, second baseman. He's mixed in at third base. CJ Cron, I believe, has 1 year left on his team control. So if you could speak to a couple additions that you've made this offseason, but also just to throw out a preface, it feels like you guys have made a pretty concerted effort the last 2 or 3 years to build up young talent through trades and through whatever means, but also when you supplement in free agency and via trade, it's been short-term deals. It's been at least the ones that you've landed to this point. So can you speak to that strategy?
Yeah, so I think talking about that last point first, I think a little bit of a different kind of approach to last year and this year, and even though we ended up with more one-year guys, kind of entirely different circumstances in my mind. When we look at this past year, 2017, we were very fortunate come February that we felt there were really good fits for our club. So guys like Lance Lynn or Logan Morrison or otherwise, that was a unique situation where maybe on the back end as you were going into the season, it started to become reasonable to think about one-year deals. This year it's actually on the flip side. We're on the front end of the conversation. CJ Cron's a unique one because he was a waiver claim, so someone who had been placed on waivers, so his control is whatever his control is. We didn't invest in any longer term or shorter term. We just agreed to an arbitration salary. But then in Jonathan Schoop's case, a 27-year-old second baseman who was 1 year removed from being one of the better players in the game at the position, certainly performed about as well as anybody. Dealt with an oblique injury early this year, and I can tell you that from my experience with guys who've dealt with that and talking around the league, those things can linger and really impact the season. So Jonathan, he knows he didn't put up his best last year. He tried to fight through it at different junctures and didn't quite perform, I think, the way he would have hoped, certainly. We all know that. But this is a chance to get a guy who's one of the younger guys in the free agent market at a position of need who we think is 1 year removed from really being an impact guy. So it's just worked out in that sense where for him, maybe the 1 year is best on both sides, where it gives him a chance to kind of rebuild where he needs to be going back into free agency. I think if we had looked at the end of 2017 at Jonathan Schoop, we would have thought this is setting up for a pretty big free agent outcome here at some point along the way. I think he wants to get back on that track, so we understand that from a length standpoint. So for us, we're supplementing our core. I do believe that you build championship teams around an internal core, whether you trade for it or you develop it internally. A young core has to sustain your success moving forward. And in our particular situation, I think we're really attentive to how we impact that team with complementary pieces. And I think about our first free agent deal here was a 3-year deal in Jason Castro. So we're not averse to multiple year deals, but you have to be thoughtful the more years you go out, how it impacts your club.
Speaking of people, Derek, what did you learn last spring? You signed Lynn and that group, and we all thought, I'm sure you did, we talked about it, this is fantastic. These guys are still out there, and it's February going into March, and they're not extremely expensive, and they're going to help. What did you learn about people, though, who are somewhat disgruntled by their lot in life? Because that's the one thing in that clubhouse that I started to see, and it actually made sense. I didn't think about it at the time. But, if you're Lance Lynn, you're thinking, I'm going to hit the market in November, and I'm going to get this big contract, and it doesn't happen. What did that teach you about people? And now when you're signing guys, I think you're truly getting guys that want to be here, as opposed to, oh, my God, I'm desperate, I'll sign with you.
Yeah, I think last year was such a unique year. I mean, right, you had those, to your point, we went into spring training seeing that there were some guys still on the board that were maybe somewhat surprising to still be there. And, when those conversations transpired and we had a chance to talk to Jim Pola and he was supportive, made a lot of sense, right? For our team, for where we were coming off of the 2017 season, felt like we were in a good place. So in my mind, going into it, the thing I think we did learn a little bit was the combination of maybe the experience of going through the offseason, the challenge of that. I don't take that lightly for a guy, who goes into an offseason maybe expecting something and not ending up on the same at the same place on the back end of that. So that is something we've learned. But at the same time, I would say one of the challenges maybe we did learn league-wide was getting those guys into camp really does matter, and when they get started and when the season starts. I think in Lance's case, great example. I'm not sure he was quite where he needed to be come opening day. And we saw really the way he pitched down the stretch in New York was kind of more maybe what we would have hoped to see over the course of the longer period for us. But he worked his tail off to try and put himself there. He just didn't quite work out, I think, the way he wanted for the year. So I think we learn a lot from every free agent cycle. We don't really, I don't want to take too much from kind of one experience here or there, because I think there were guys across baseball, whether it was Mike Moustakas or J.D. Martinez or others who went into situations and really had great years as well. So in my mind, I think we just want to be attentive to the culture is always important. We started this off talking about analytics versus some of the cultural elements in people. We always need to be attentive to what the culture is in that clubhouse and the people we bring in. I
feel like you guys are sitting on like a 10 to 12 win swing just based on Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano in 2019 and going forward. What hope is there for both of those guys? And I know they're not one person, so you can address them separately, but what hope is there for those guys to have the light bulb turn on and for them to be the core star players that everyone hopes that they can be.
Yeah, in hindsight, looking at the back end of the year, we went back to our preseason projections and kind of where we thought we'd be and what can we learn from what transpired. And I think the key area for us looking at our roster last year, for different reasons, but we had 3 what we would consider top 50 position players in the game, in those 2 guys who you just mentioned and Brian Dozier. And, with that group, we didn't quite get collectively what we would have hoped out of that. No one's running from that, and most notably the players. And I think that when I look at guys like Byron and Miguel, and again, we end up bucketing them sometimes. I like to separate it too. I think they both went through different trials last year. There were struggles for a lot of different reasons on both sides, but we know they're both immensely talented. We've seen flashes of that. Whether it was for me, since I've been here, the first half of 2017 for Miguel and what led into his All-Star appearance, and then the second half of Byron, and what he was capable of doing. All of our young players have kind of put together stretches of time where you see if it can be consistent over 500 to 600 plate appearances. Now you've got a really interesting core. So, whether that's Eddie Rosario, Byron Buxton, Max Kepler, Jorge Polanco, at different junctures, Miguel Sano, obviously Jose Barrios. Those are some of the young players that we think we have that if they put together the full spectrum of what we think they can over the course of a season, we have a real chance to impact. And we have to stay healthy, right? At the end of the day, last year, one of the big challenges, I looked at our roster and I said, okay, of our opening day starting roster, or what we would have thought, outside of Max Kepler, and we lost everybody for some period of time. Byron went down. Rosie didn't finish the year. Miguel, of course. Polanco dealt with the suspension. Brian didn't have quite the year he had. Joe at first had a concussion and missed a good chunk of the middle of the year. We lost our starting catcher, a month into the season, and then our opening day starter was Irvin Santana, and that didn't go quite as well as we would have hoped. So our view of it is you got to stay healthy, and then you got to have that group perform the way we see it. But that's why we see high variance in this club that can take the step back that you're talking about. The 10 to 12 win swing. It's possible with this team that you could see that in a very short period of time because it's a young roster with real talent, and we'll see where it goes.
What is a Buxton's state of mind right now, and in Sano's case, I guess more importantly than his state of mind, what's his shape right now?
Sure. So both guys, so Byron and I have connected a few times since the season had ended, texted with him over Thanksgiving, and he's in a good place. Talk with his agent. He's in a good place around. He wants to get healthy. He wants to focus on next year. That was the plan at the end of the year. He's hitting. He's doing everything he needs to do. So right now we're focused on just putting him in the best position to be successful. And just in talking with his agent recently around, he represents some other players as well, free agents and otherwise. I know he's really in a good place mentally. In Miguel's case, we've been very attentive, probably more so than the average player in terms of check-ins in the offseason.
Don't blame you.
And that was part of the plan. We said that right at the outset. So it was going to be a couple of weeks down of just let the season end and digest, and then from that point forward to check in every week around where things are with his workout plan. He spent time with our minor league strength and conditioning coordinator, Ian Kadish, who built the plan, who was really impactful and effective when Miguel went down to Fort Myers during that trip early. So Ian spent time with him in the Dominican. They put a plan together. They have a very clear kind of month-to-month focus, and he is the benefits of technology now, right? He can film all his workouts. He can send back all kinds of information. We make sure he goes back to our complex, to get some check-ins and things like that. So so far so good. And then we anticipate him coming to Fort Myers at some point here in December, and then as well as in January, and hope to get him before spring training. So the more we can focus on getting his body where it needs to be, physically strong. He's going to be a big man. We have no doubt about that. But I think making sure that he can move the way he needs to move and put himself in the best possible position to be successful is important to us.
So Joe's gone now, and I think the outside point of view from this building is going to be the Twins got all of this money. Just go spend it, And people are, as you know by now, there's a lot of people in this town dying to say cheap Pohlads, right? Sure. How do you respond to those fans who expect you to go to Vegas and beyond and just start to spend all of this cash because the 23 mil's off the books and there's just a lot of cash out there for you?
Well, two things. One's just a fact. The first one, which is we carried our highest payroll in club history last year going into the season. Like that's just a straight fact. And anything I brought to Jim Pohlad and Dave St. Peter and otherwise, they blessed. So if we think it's a good baseball decision, you talked about those 1-year investments late. Those were not small necessarily. They were 1 year certainly, but they weren't small, and we carried a pretty significant payroll into last year. But I also think that you have to be careful equating payroll with team quality all the time, right? I think you have to be really attentive to how you invest and where you invest. And I think that my view of free agency, and this is also just in my mind a fact. When you look at past seasons and investments and long-term investments, there are times when you want to push in on certain types of players and they fit you and they fit your young core really well. There are other times when it may not be the perfect fit, and so you just decide that, well, that's a great player and maybe he fits a different team and their time horizon a little better and the team and the need that they have on their club. There were certainly players last year in the market that we felt like were great fits for somebody, but maybe not for us in the outfield, say, something like that, where we thought those would be good investments, but not with the way our outfield was set up. So my view of it is, I feel like my job as our head of baseball operations is to recommend what I think are the best investments across baseball operations. That could be in technology, that could be in coaching, that could be in our health and performance and nutrition initiatives, but also in players. And I know that's the biggest chunk of what you see publicly, but I'm never going to recommend an investment in something that I don't think aligns really well with the way our club's set up, either now or in the future. So the more flexibility we have, the better off we're going to be to build the type of team that fans here want to see.
And with that said, we're going to let you go because we know you have to get to Las Vegas and sign Bryce Harper. So
that's
Machado
well put.
Too, right?
Well put. Well put.
You're getting both of them.
And Machado. Yeah, exactly.
Come on, shortstop.
Who are those guys?
Derek Falvey, thank you so much for taking the time.
Appreciate being on with you guys. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. TCL launched a new lineup of award-winning 4K Roku TVs to deliver the best sports, movies, TV shows, and thousands of streaming channels. TCL's personalized home screen makes it easy to customize your TCL to fit the way you watch. Binge watch what you want, when you want. TCL delivers excellent picture quality, sleek design, and stunning resolution at an affordable price. TCL, America's fastest-growing TV brand, is available at major retailers everywhere. Learn more at TCLUSA.com.
ADT can design and install a smart home just for you, backed by 24/7 protection. A new smart home at your service, customized for your lifestyle. Set up custom automations unique to your home to automatically do the things like lock the doors or set the thermostat when you leave. Even close your garage door from virtually anywhere. ADT will set up your home with multiple smart home devices and security features like indoor and outdoor cameras, locks, lights, and garage door control, even video doorbells. Visit ADT.com/podcasts to learn more about how ADT can design and install a secure smart home just for you.